Getting into one where we say, you know what, there is a way for us to be involved in terms of what happens in the nation. Keeping quiet is not a way of doing things anymore. It's got to change. The voice of Wanjiku, one voice, millions heard. And in the hot seat this morning is Cornelius Chepsoi. He's a businessman and he's here. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Very well. How are you doing?
Very good, very good.
Karibu sana.
Finally, I make it to this table. The hot seat.
The hot seat, indeed.
Yes, and I hope he doesn't have the proverbs today.
He does. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it would turn out to be a good thing.
Let's see what the proverb is.
We'll tell everybody who you are in a minute, but first of all, let's welcome you properly with that proverb. He'll tell you where we are. Dennis will tell you which country we're in, and then we'd like to hear interpretation. All right.
So today we are in South Africa. South Africa, the country, but within South Africa, the country, there's another country called Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. What do you know about Swaziland?
Apart from the dance.
So they also have lions, rhinos, and elephants. So our proverb today, the antelope that is constantly moving will fall in a pit. The antelope that is constantly moving will fall in a pit. What do you make of that?
Oh, and you made sure you took the hardest of proverbs, eh?
Easy, Ian.
So I'm wondering, if the antelope didn't move, it wouldn't fall in a pit. Yeah, this is quite a tough one. Why would you choose?
You can never be wrong by the...
Why would you choose... I would imagine the antelope that constantly moves will fall in a pit.
In a pit.
First of all, if it didn't move, it would not fall. So,
yes.
Then it moved and it fell. End of the day, anyway, we all are moving. And we all are trying to be careful of what we do. But somehow we'll make that mistake. We'll fall in that pit. So I would imagine, yes, we make mistakes as we go along the way. I do not know what these Swazi guys were thinking.
That's it.
That's fine.
As you move, you will make mistakes.
That's good.
Right?
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So you appeared on all our social media threads over the last couple of days, and people have been saying we will not take this kind of thing lying down, we will not, etc., etc. You've also let us know that this particular video that you were in was actually a year old. It was last year, maybe some months old.
I don't know about that.
So maybe about 6 months. It was 6 months ago or so that this happened. But that notwithstanding, what you did essentially through, and we're going to play that video in just a little bit for folks to hear what it is that we're talking about, but essentially putting people to task and say, well, this kind of nonsense that we've been dealt in the past, we're not going to allow that to continue to happen. And so here are individuals, here are people who are captains and players in industry, have a right to know what is going on, and you can no longer hide from them. So we're just going to play that clip so that we can get some foundation in terms of what exactly happened. Dear?
Same thing. The government has become a business mortician. You should have checked the government statistics before you came here. Taxes are going down because of this kind of talk. I'm sorry, but I want you to go and get as annoyed as I am. These people have invested in their machines. If you ask, God, I'm here, seated. He's been in this industry longer than me. He has a lot of rigs. He has invested more than 100 or 200 million. You can't just walk in here and refuse to listen to this gentleman when he tells you that government, has made balls very expensive. Those illegal balls, when I see you're talking about, you're very responsible. Because it takes so long for your permit to come out. In fact, I've always asked this one question. Once I make an application and pay government fee, and somebody has come to inspect, what do you call that thing? They call it what? Site verification. You still have to wait for Walmart to send this thing from Nairobi to Machakos to NHIF. Then it takes the same route for you to give me the same time. What are you talking about? Let's be serious. We will end this nonsense. When I see you, listen to me. Even when you did the regulation, I was with the chairman.
So, Chepsoi, you quite upset, but you seem to have been speaking for some truth here. So tell us what exactly the issue was, because what it is right now is that it is a representation of what many other people are going through in the country. And you said something that was very interesting. You said, Atuta danganyanga tena, it is enough. We can't be going through this and over again. What's lay the base for us?
Thank you very much. First, thank you for inviting me here today. Finally made it here, I said, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to speak about the things that affect us, especially as business people. Now, we as a country, we have to come to that place where we ask ourselves, who does what? When government, for example, makes taxation, taxes us for activities that we do. I don't wake up in the morning knowing I'm going to work so I can pay taxes to government. And I think this is a narrative that has been quite pushed to a point that we have lost the meaning of business. People wake up in the morning to do business so they can feed their own families. And along the way, the taxman takes his share of your work or your income, for that matter. In the process, we lose that idea that the person who goes out to look out for that business ought to remain with a bigger portion of his income, for the very reason that he invested his mind, he invested his hard labor, his capital, and all that for the benefit of himself and his family. Now, sometimes government forgets that aspect and begins to put in regulations without thinking about what the implication is on the businessman. Taxes have been going up for very long. If you look at, if you were to take a couple of years, you'll notice that taxation is generally on the upward trend. In fact, it's a big debate with the new finance bill. Back to the context of this, we were having a dinner actually with one of our biggest suppliers, and I don't know whether I should mention, but anyway, the thing is, it was one of the suppliers of in the water industry. They sell meters, they sell pumps, and all that stuff. And they invited us for a dinner, and everybody was there. The rig owners, the what some guys we call the pumping fellows, hydrogeologists, all these people who had come for the dinner as well. Invited to the dinner was also the regulator, and it was represented by the CEO of Water Resource Authority. And he had made his presentation. I was actually late, and I came in when he was making the presentation. I'd come from a site. And part of what he was talking about was the upcoming regulations, which are now out. And in those regulations, some of the things were going up. The cost of applying for something called authorization to drill. We anticipated some penalties for maybe boreholes that have been drilled without going through the process of authorization and permitting. And anyway, there's quite a lot of things that he was saying. It was in relation to the upcoming regulations. So in that, at that point, one of the drillers asked a question and to the CEO, and he said he thought that the new rates were too expensive for the customers. And I remember the CEO actually mentioned something they do, what they call benchmarking.
Okay.
And one of the places they had benchmarked was in Copenhagen. And I thought to myself, what is the relationship between Copenhagen and Kenya?
Not Copenhagen in Turkana, but the one in Denmark.
In Denmark,
okay.
Yeah. So at that point, I thought, look, we are dealing with two different environments completely. My view is, if you go back in history, countries like Japan, China, and others have developed by looking at themselves more than others. Because, some of these countries like China today, they have developed by copying a lot of technologies from countries like the US. I'm not saying that, we go stealing ideas, but you've got to think about your local circumstance. Kenya, for example, is a water deficient country. And by water deficient, I mean, you don't, you have a country that doesn't have enough water. 80% of Kenya is arid. Let's start there. Once you cross Kitui, you go to parts of Machakos, you go to Garissa, you go to Marsabit, you go to Turkana. These are places where you have to spend quite a lot of your time finding the resource water. Then you come to places like Nairobi and the Western Kenya, where there's a lot of rainfall, but we don't have the infrastructure to harness this water. So when you talk about deficiency, you're not only speaking about the scarcity of the resource itself, which applies to places like Turkana, the arid areas. You're also talking about scarcity of infrastructure to harness this water. Remember, the Constitution has said that government, every person has a right to adequate water. Another adequacy also is followed by something else, potability. That water has to be clean for use, and it's in our Constitution. So now, WRA is the organization mandated to regulate the use of this resource, the resource itself.
Yeah.
There's another organization, of course, WASREP, which regulates the service. Yes. Yeah. But in our case, it's WRA that regulates the resource, because, quote, we are the service provider to the individuals who drill their own boreholes. Yeah. So I was actually alluding to the fact that WRA may be missing the point by not listening to us more than they were listening to Copenhagen. And I was saying, let's do better public participation with the locals, the people who practice on a daily basis. Let's hear them out. Let's hear, what is this regulations? How do they want to be governed? Of course, we are not saying that we want to set the rules, because this resource is not only for the businessman. It is also for the person who's enjoying the resource.
Yeah.
So we were discussing that aspect. So it's also important to put that context so that people understand.
To understand.
Yeah, where we were coming from.
Yeah.
That we were discussing upcoming regulations for the industry.
So if we take this and we broaden it.
Yes.
So yesterday we had a conversation around, of course, the finance bill and budget and all of this.
Yes.
And Bill Okero, who was here with us, said something. And he said, you know what, this public participation, which you've mentioned just now, this public participation is actually a tool that government doesn't realize how effective it can be to be able to help you do things and do things right. So you mentioned that you were in a place where captains and players in this particular industry were there. They were all there. The people who practice this thing on a daily basis. The people who would then be able to give you the best insights into what you would do. And that if we actually took public participation seriously, and then actually have people who are, this is their everyday touch to hand a business, that if you heard from them as government, it would make your job so much easier. And they're here, they're doing the thing, as opposed to going outside to benchmark. You can actually benchmark right in your own country, because there are people who have made it their trade. They have perfected it. They know what to do. So that comes to mind, especially when you go towards the Copenhagen idea, initiative for benchmarking. Why do you think that these departments, you talked about WRA, you talk about WASREP, why do you think that they don't take best practice information from the people who are practicing it every day? Why?
So I think, to be fair, there's a challenge generally, and I think it stems from very many things. But I have almost asked myself, why is it that generally in Africa we wind up with complaining about our own governments the most? And I think this thing stems from the idea that the African mind pays more homage to leadership, or for the lack of a better word in the Kenyan context, more often than not the politics than the real gist of the matter. So when you look at the reasons why, for example, we don't listen to business people, is I think business people or other practitioners, as you say, is I think we don't have as a country an aspiration goal, long-term goal, long-range thinking, so that every regime that comes is experienced only to its own desires. So public participation would therefore have given us the opportunity to get very good insights on what goes on in an industry if, for example, we didn't have too many changes in policies and desires that satisfy single regimes. Remember, government officers survive regimes. So you find somebody maybe was worked in WRA or any other institution for that matter for much longer than a CEO who comes in for 3 years, has his term renewed for another 3 years and goes. So my biggest issue is not even with particular institutions. I think it stems from our habit as a people, where we tend to switch our mind to reflect the desires of particular regimes that come and go. So you go to a country like China, and I've had clients who, we chat about these things. It almost doesn't matter who's president. They have a long trajectory. So everybody in their mind knows where the goal is. 50-year plans, 100-year plans. Yeah? In Kenya, we have 5-year plans. So you almost want to turn government to suit your 5-year game plan. So these government officers also, switch because you have to survive your job. You have to stay in line of the regime that comes.
Yeah.
So public participation then begins to fall on the aspect that, we are not creating laws that, are moving towards a certain goal in the future. So much so that if governments, as you say, understood the power of the people, they would actually make you shine. Like what I was telling the CEO, if we sit with us, you don't have to spend a lot of effort, money, resource, traveling. We'll tell you exactly where the inches are. For example, in a water deficient country like the one we have, what is the first goal that you should be doing? If you read the Constitution, for example, you will realize that or the Water Act, the government is required to legislate and to progressively legislate in a manner that they are able to begin to give society that adequate water. So Kenya, we tend to just write laws and forget what the intent was. So when we go to public participation, we don't go back to a policy statement in mind that is long range in nature, so that we are looking at where have we arrived, what is this legislation impeding, how can we correct that. My view is that as a nation, we first need to come to a point where we agree on what we want to achieve as a nation, collectively, first of all. Once we have that in mind, then any office bearer begins to look at that eventual goal. Because when you have something that you're working so hard towards, then you ensure that the people come with you. In fact, regimes would win elections if they only listen to people. It would be very easy. If you actually go to people and say, hey, you're a driller, like myself, how do we protect this resource? How do we make sure that the customer receives this water in time and at a cost that is affordable? Because government is not going to provide you water. It's never going to be able to provide. In our lifetime, it doesn't matter. They don't have the money. I mean, you remember in the recent past, the president has been saying we need to build 100 dams. It is true. We need all those 100 dams. But who is going to do it? It's the business people. I mean, government doesn't have the money to put up 100 dams.
Well, they may have the money. It's just that maybe it is not the priority right now to put up 100 dams.
If this government had the money, then we would all feel in our pockets, because as we speak, more than 50% of all the resources that we have in Kenya is going to debt repayment. So where else can you look to achieve government goal? It's the business people. It's giving them legislations and room to do business. That's why the drillers are here. The government can't give you water. The driller like myself invests in a rig. I come to your farm, I make a borehole, you have your water. You've provided yourself water, yes, but it was enabled by good legislation that allowed you to utilize the resource. So I'm saying, yes, government can continue to borrow, to provide water and all these other things. But the other easy way is to allow that gap to be breached by business people like ourselves.
Cornelius, I hear you speak in terms of water is a resource that is not there.
Yeah.
But that notwithstanding as well, infrastructure is not there anywhere as well. But that people like you who've gotten into this sector to ensure that Kenyans get this resource that is enshrined in the Constitution. They ought to have it. But there is fear that those in authority to regulate and ensure that that things happen as they should do not listen, right? And with this now, with the policy changes that you say are out right now, we see a situation where the prices would go up for the regular Kenyan, because if prices go to you, you transfer that to the mwananchi, right? But then again, we still go back to the matter to do with public participation. Before even the policy was being put in place, was there any communication with you before the draft came out?
Yes. So if you listen to that clip, we were aware that public participation was happening. But at the time the public participation was happening, the nearest we were it could also be that we may have gotten that communication or heard about the public participation when other sessions had happened. But at the time, the only other place we could go was in Machakos. And as she rightly put, government is also clever in how they do public participation, because they invest a lot of time in writing the laws, and many people don't want to have to go back to say we have to make amendments, and these things are also quite lengthy. So many people don't want to have to go back to the drawing board to rewrite the laws that they feel comfortable. And remember, I have to say this, and they say when somebody says I'm sorry, they're about to say something. But I'm sorry that sometimes government officers will sit, and write the law that makes their job easier. So if I tell you, take care of this building, this standard this standard building, you're likely to ask for a brigade that helps you achieve your goal, without really thinking about the implication in terms of cost. So government officers sometimes may sit and forget that in doing very, like what I was saying, if you tighten the laws too much, then you lose the goal.
The goal.
You can take care of this building so hard that nobody comes in. There's always a joke of telling your watchman, don't let anybody, when you leave your house and you tell him, don't let anybody in, and your wife shows up and you didn't tell your watchman, please remember there are people who ought to access by virtue of the fact that they are related to you or anything like that. So if that guy doesn't ask the question, so this is a wife, should I let her in? I was told to do not let anybody in. So you see, we must make laws that are fair to both sides. Right? When you're regulating, you make sure that it does not injure the person that you're trying to protect, for example. So in our case, for example, we are saying, don't tighten this rule so hard that even the customer, the very person who is not accessing water from the county government or from national government is unable to receive water. That was the gist of this matter, saying, please listen to us, the practitioners. We can tell you how to comply. And in that video, you hear me telling the CEO, make compliance easy. One of the biggest challenges I find with many regulations is they forget the aspect of compliance. Yes, the resource is not mine, so it must be regulated. You have to ensure that there's equity, there's sustainability in that resource. But in doing so, also make sure that I am able to, if there's a fee to pay for it, for you to be able to assess whether I deserve to use a resource, make it easy for me to pay you. Don't tell me to go and pay cash, if I could have as well paid it by digital means. Don't tell me, you have to put a specific kind of meter if, a simple one would do. I understand where WRA is coming in on this issue of automated meters, for example, is because that cost is actually so low that if they were to come to your house to read the meter, it defeats the whole purpose of metering the water, because it used to be 50 cents, I think, or thereabout, for every 1,000 liter. And yet they still have to collect that 50 cents from you. So we were having that discussion and saying, there are other means. I could do self meter reading. Yeah, I can read that meter myself and send you. Then on one day when your staff member is going to do a site visit or site verification, they may as well pass by the board and just confirm without necessarily driving to just come and read that particular meter. So there are many ways. We need to look at these aspects of governance in a manner that benefits the end user, not just the government. You see, we don't exist to serve government. Everybody must always remember, this government exists to serve us. It exists to make sure your interests and my interests are taken care of, and that if we disagree, they can arbitrate in a manner that works for all of us.
Cornelius, you know, it's interesting. You say the government exists to serve us.
Yes.
I go back to the conversation of benchmarking, and we love this word. And in government, benchmarking is one of those very people look forward to benchmarking. So in this case, the benchmarking was done in Copenhagen. Okay, so when this presentation was going on, how does this benchmarking outside, because you're saying the government exists to serve us. So if I'm serving you, I need to have a conversation with you and understand your business and what you're doing, what are your challenges, and how we can smoothen things out.
Yes.
So when this conversation now moves out of having a conversation with you whom I'm serving to benchmark with somebody in another space, in another part of the world, what was this connection, benchmarking in Copenhagen, to what you guys were doing in that meeting?
Yeah. So okay, I'm sure, of course, they benchmarked with many other places, but of course, the one that came at that point was the issue of Copenhagen. Of course, there are very many reasons why government people benchmark many things, including regulations. So obviously, I'm imagining that in this aspect, in this particular incident, they were looking for people who may have written this kind of laws for quite a long time. It was a context for me that that was the issue. You know, we are seated there, and we are talking about a law that is benchmarked with a developed country, a country that is able to provide water to the entire population that it has. In fact, in many of these European countries, you know, your tap water, you don't pay metered. They assume that you're going to use water, you know, reasonably. So some of these countries just put the water for you, and they have a flat rate for the water that you consume in your house, because it's assumed it is a right to everybody, and it should be availed to all of you, and it's also assumed that you'll be reasonable enough to use that water in a good way. So I was saying, we are coming from a different aspect of society. We are starting off from a place of scarcity. We are starting off from a place of deficiency. And our situation, therefore, is different from Copenhagen. Copenhagen, they have a very developed infrastructure. They have a very developed society. They have different values from ours. We are discussing, Copenhagen is a city, and we are discussing laws also that affect a farmer. That's the case of Turkana, for example. By the way, the reason why I was mentioning Turkana in this case is I have had a situation, and I'm sure many other drillers have been in this situation, where you've been paid by a donor to go and drill a borehole, and it turns out dry. That person has been waiting for the water. They don't care who footed the bill for you to come there. They will tell you, there's so much land here in Turkana, you can move wherever you want, but you are only going to leave this place when we have the resource. So I had to go back to a donor and said, listen, these guys are not smiling with me because I didn't get water. And you know, they're armed. They're saying, no, you live here when you provide us water. You have to, and you, at that time, the issue of payment does not arise with the man on the ground. So you have to call your donor and say, my rig is now Metegwa Nyara. So lucky for me, I had a donor who actually paid for us to drill another borehole. We were successful. We left when we had provided water. So my biggest problem with these issues is that we need to pay attention to ourselves and what works for us. What is it? Why is it that we set a lot of these laws based on other people when we can develop these things? Otherwise, what's the point of education? Why do we go to school? Why do we invest time and years of trying to join professions? Yeah, you have engineers. Even among us, we have engineers. We have people like myself trained in business management. We have, drilling is not. It's an investment. We are not like lawyers who then have to have studied law. We are, in fact, among ourselves, we have lawyers who own rigs. So if you came to an association like ours, because we have an umbrella body called the Rig Owners Association, you would actually find a lot of these people who can help you redraft these laws in a manner that is beneficial to society. Of course, I have to mention, after this dinner, we have had several other forums with Warma. We are actually working together right now. We've made quite some progress in trying to even ease. Even though it is in letter, we're trying to say, okay, look, for example, you're saying the permit has to come out in within 60 days. Why does it have to take 60 days? Yes, it is in the law. But what is it that is making you wait for 60 days? Can we look?
Can we do it sooner?
Yes, can we do it sooner? Yeah, and there are things like I'll say this. Two days ago, I was actually with the same CEO. We had a meeting, and last week we also, as an association, we had been to his office. I'd gone there to complain about my own issue. And in the process, we actually had a very nice, decent meeting with the CEO and his chair. And I was saying, look, there's an easier way to do this. And I was able to, to put that point across. And the CEO said, yes, actually it is possible in that case to give you this authorization to drill within a short time. He has promised me 10 days. I am waiting to see the 10 days.
So there's a conversation. Yesterday we had a conversation with Bill Okero, and what he was talking about is sometimes coming up with this, some of these laws or ways of even raising taxes. In that example, is it almost feels like government is detached from business people or business owners, where if they're coming up with things that will affect business, they sit down somewhere, draft things, and then they come tell you, no, this is how we're going to work. Do you feel as a business person in this context that running a business in this country almost feels like you're so detached, no one cares? It's almost like it's a punishment to have a business where somebody sits somewhere, comes up with regulations, because in the clip you are saying tuache kudanganyana, end this nonsense. Are you feeling as a business person in this country that we're at that point where your voices are not heard, yet there's an expectation to pay taxes, to do all these things and follow through the regulation? Yeah,
to be quite honest. In fact, that clip I start by saying government has become a business mortician.
Yes.
It is barring businesses. And I wanted this to be heard because every time you set a law that affects a business, you have to ask yourself, what will happen to revenue? See, you must set a law. If I'm seated in government, I have to ask myself, what is the implication of this law to revenue and to goals that you want to achieve? You see, government has two major things when they set laws. Number one is, do you have a policy that you want to achieve? For example, in our situation, by setting this law, do you set it in a manner that it makes it easier for people to access water? Are you making the law to ensure that access to water is improved?
Right.
Or are you making the law to increase revenue? Because government has to balance between those two things. It has to raise revenue so that it can give you service. But also, it must meet the expectations of its citizens. We vote in governments based on manifestos.
Sure.
Manifestos that tell us what they will do for us. So yes, I feel that sometimes government is forgetting that if you do not protect the businessman, you will wind up with a situation where you do not have enough taxes to provide the very service for which we elected you.
Cornelius, we talk about public participation and how critical it is. There is a feeling that public participation is just another card that is there because it's in the Constitution. We'll do it anyway, not necessarily because we want to see proper services. But I want to flip the question and ask, proper public participation happen, like say you had a meeting with rig owners like yourself with regard to this policy. We need to change like this in order to provide this service like this. And let's extrapolate it and just look at it as a government that listens to the people and hears what it is they say. What kind of relationship would you see between the people and the government that serves them?
You know, if the voices of the citizens, and in this case Kenyans, was heard, you know, any regime that comes to power, whether it's this one or the one that's coming, would actually have a very easy time. Because like I said, we don't exist to serve government. We want a government that serves us. In fact, the only reason we have government is because you have a different mind from mine. And there's a point at which your mind is going to differ from mine. What you want and what I want will differ. For example, like I just told you, in this issue of the water, there's a conflict between what is fair for this generation and what is fair for the next generation. How much of what we have now do we abstract? Because, you know, water is also a finite resource. And if, for example, you drill a borehole 200 meters from me, you have already put in your money. And I drill a borehole 200 meters from you, you know what's going to happen is we're going to share the same resource.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah? I could be doing agriculture. I may be planting vegetables, and you're only using it, you know, for your household purposes. Now, I'll be abstracting more water than you are. Now, if we differ, because if your bowl goes dry, I'd be arguing, I need this water because I have to irrigate my vegetables. But you need the water because you're using it to cook and to, you know, do other things within your house. That's where government comes in to protect the resource. And that's the purpose of ensuring that public participation happens, so that you listen to both sides of the coin and then go ahead to create a law that then works for these people. Now, if governments were to take these things seriously, believe me, we'd have a very beautiful society. Because then the laws that are in place were created by us. Remember, when you go to public participation, what do? You actually sign in a book. In fact, more public participations now that are real and genuine, they take a picture of you. They make sure that you don't come back to say I was not present or I was not represented. So the thing is, we must stop making public participation, you know, just one of those things that you're ticking boxes. And it goes back to what I said originally. It is a mindset thing. It is, what do we want to achieve as a country? What is the purpose of, you know, setting these laws? What does it achieve? What will this law do to us? You know, we must take stock of what the law has done for us, so that we're not just feeling. In fact, I have this view that we have so many laws in this country that we have forgotten the earlier ones. In fact, you have one law based on another one, and you don't even know what the one that you base this law on is saying. If you walk in the streets of Nairobi today, even myself, if you ask me, I don't have enough. I don't know much of my own constitution. In fact, I was when I was there yesterday, I was saying, you know, we need to create popular versions of all these laws. You must have seen people go to court to argue and to talk about conflicting laws. You have said this in this law, and you have said this is in the other law. Because we have a tendency to just pass laws. And pass this law, pass that law, pass this law, pass that law.
Yes, I'm curious, because 80% of this country, like you say, doesn't clearly have access to water, can't get water. For someone who wants to drill a borehole, let's talk numbers, and let's talk about the clearance that you will need for you to come dig a borehole and the end consumer. What processes do you go through, permits, licenses, and what does it cost you, and what does it then cost me who wants to have access to the water? Break it down for us.
That's very good, actually. So it is good that you asked that question, because after this meeting that we had, we have been grappling with these issues as drillers. We're actually being run out of business. In fact, let me just be clear, we're not even being run out of business by WRA. In fact, even WRA itself is worried that an industry is dying. And it's dying on account of people that wake up one morning and decide we must raise revenue here. And I'm speaking about counties. So let me first break down for you what it takes to drill a borehole of your own. Forget commercial boreholes. You would have to do something called an hydrogeological survey. and it's important for you, and it's also important for government. That hydrogeological survey will cost you anything between, for a good geologist, anything between 40 and 50,000. Some go as high as 80, but take an average of 50,000 for the hydrogeological survey. You finish that. Then you come to the permitting part, which is called authorization to drill. You start with the first permit, which is an authority to drill.
Yeah.
It's given to you by Water Resource Authority, which manages this resource. That will cost you 25,000. Okay? That's around 25,000 to do that. Once you receive the authorization, and this is where we were having problems with drillers, and we're making progress with WRA on that matter, the delay on the issue of time, because it used to take us up to 3 months to get this document. But in law, they say 60 days. So once you get this document, now we go to the next aspect. There's something called environmental impact assessment. It will cost you something like 40,000 or 50,000 for the person who writes for you the report. Then you file that report with government.
Oh, the report is paid for, essentially.
Of course, you pay.
And this is based on findings on the ground.
Yes,
sites.
so this expert goes to the ground, to ask the neighbors whether they are okay with the borehole.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they also check what impact it will have on the environment and stuff like that. That person will charge you 40,000. Then you pay government fee, 10,000 shillings. Right, I'm sure you realize we are past the 100,000 mark already.
Yeah, we're at 115,000.
Then hell breaks loose from there. Hell breaks loose because you still have to get a letter of no objection from the water company. So in the case of Nairobi, you have to get a letter of no objection from Nairobi Water.
Okay.
Because
And this is in every county.
Yes, they are saying this is our jurisdiction. You see, there's another regulator called WASREP, which regulates the service provision end of things. So Nairobi Water falls within the armpits of WASREP. They have been allocated an area in which to operate within the Nairobi area, right? Those borders sometimes do not follow the political boundaries, by the way. You need to know. Because there's something you need to understand. The way this water resource is managed, it is based on the flow of water, mostly indicated by the flow of rivers. So sometimes they would overlap within counties. Now you get that letter of no objection from these water companies. And if we're being honest, we're living in Kenya. That letter can take you months. So most people have to find someone who knows somebody inside to help you
for the letter to come out.
Yes, for the letter to come out.
Sorry, I just want to clarify
it's
something.
free, yes, but
I want to clarify something. This 115,000 that we've paid so far, because we did the 40,000, then you do another 25, another 40, another 10,000. We're at 115,000, and your rig has not touched ground.
No, it doesn't. It hasn't moved. It's still in my yard.
Okay.
Or somewhere in another site, waiting for this one.
Now we're waiting for a letter.
Yes, we're waiting for
coming from where?
From the water company, like Nairobi Water, Eldoret Water, and others.
This is at the county level.
Yes, at the county level.
Okay.
Then the counties now have gone wild. They have raised their own invoices. Now, I have to be very honest on this table. You go to a county which is water deficient, like Taita Taveta, they want 200,000.
For what?
For you to drill the borehole in their county.
Just to say come and do.
No, he's not inviting me. I'm being invited by an individual.
Yeah.
But for me to go and drill the borehole on that individual's farm, I pay 200,000.
That's a fee under what?
So counties will name it whatever they want. Some call it drilling permits. They don't even have a name. You know, they've put these laws in their finance acts as ways of raising funds. Because remember, by law, it is Water Resource Authority that is mandated to protect this resource. They have no role. They have no role, absolutely no role. This, I speak for WRA. Even them, they are struggling. They have issued notices to counties telling them it is not within your armpit to charge fees on this aspect of water. In fact, when you read the Water Act, it states clearly that this resource, the Water Act itself,
it's a national
is
resource.
very clear that it is a national resource. And the reason is obvious. This water is not static. It doesn't. There's no water that is static in Nairobi County, for example.
It's our water.
Yes.
Yes, and it's moving.
Yeah.
From whether it's on the surface or it's underground, water is always moving. So, for example, if you look at the way they have demarcated the Nairobi region office, this, I think they call it the Earth suit. It will cut across Nairobi County, Kiambu, Kajiado, Machakos, because that water underneath is in constant motion.
But the county will still ask for this
Now, the
200,000.
county will still ask me to pay them for that resource that is not theirs.
Is this 200,000 like standard across all counties?
That is the next problem. It is not standard. So in Taita Taveta it's 200,000. In Kajiado it's 50,000. It's 20,000 for the customer, 30,000 for the driller, and these laws keep changing. 2 years ago it was 30,000 per annum for the driller and 20,000 per borehole for the client. Now it's 30,000 for the driller per borehole and 20,000 for
Every customer.
every customer.
So let's stick with this 200,000 on top of the other figures.
Yes, before you go, and then I'll let you. This is how even it gets more ridiculous. In Machakos and Turkana County, very dry counties, you pay to enter their county.
Sorry?
For your rig.
Your rig, and that, what do you call those?
That boundary,
those
yeah.
barriers.
The Kanjo boundary, yeah.
The Kanjo, the
So you
cess
pay
point,
cess.
you pay
Yeah.
cess.
Okay.
For your rig to enter. It's even ridiculous. Okay, I can almost leave with the one for Turkana, except for the fact that it's the driest county. It is the last county. It's the last frontier. So they know that you're not going anywhere beyond
Anywhere,
that.
yeah.
That Machakos, for the love of God, I could be going to Kitui.
Yes.
But they will
You'll be
charge
going to
me.
Mombasa.
How much do you pay for that?
I think for Machakos it's 6,000 shillings.
Set to
6,000.
cross.
Yes, so remember, drillers have 2 to 3 trucks. You pay for all of them.
For each, so
For
it comes
each
to
of the truck.
24,000.
Yes.
So 6,000 times 3.
Oh, times 3, okay.
Yes.
So it's 18,000.
Yes. Now,
Oh, Lord. Okay. Uh-huh.
and remember, you're still going to pay for drilling
Yeah.
another 20,000.
Wait, you're
They
the
just-
driller.
Yes.
You pay 20,000 for what again?
For drilling,
For drilling.
you have to pay the county.
So
But
everything
what is
else.
this 200,000?
This is what I'm telling you. We are lost, and that's why we've come out, guns blazing. Because what is this that you're charging me? The resource is not yours.
Sorry,
It's
Cornelius.
not a business permit. I don't operate in your county.
I think we need to be very clear.
Yeah.
Because we're saying here that County Ndu,
Yeah.
in order for Cornelius
Yeah.
to come and drill a borehole, I don't care whether you'll find water. I don't care whether you will find superfluous amounts of water. The fact that you've brought your rig in and you're going to start drilling, you will pay me as County Ndu 200,000 shillings.
Yes.
This is different
Yes.
from the 20,000 shillings that whomever is going to charge you to actually start to do the thing.
Yes.
It's different from the 18,000 shillings that will charge you to come from wherever you're coming
Yes.
from to cross over into
Yes.
my county.
Yes.
And this is different from the 115,000 that we've charged
Very
you before to
different.
get a letter
Yes.
and all of this allotment,
Yes.
etc., etc.
In fact, Nairobi.
We are now at 336,000 shillings and
Yes.
we've not found water yet.
You haven't seen. No. The rig. Okay, yeah. But maybe after you pay the 200, now the rig arrives. You have not started paying me, the driller.
To start to
To
drill.
start
now.
drilling.
Where?
So you are 300,000. I mean, what did you get that figure?
336.
36,000.
You are
Yeah.
336,000 down.
So now you've crossed the county.
Yes,
You
I've-
get to my piece of land.
I've got into a piece of land.
Can you now start
Yes.
drilling?
Now, if we're talking about Taita Taveta, maybe most drillers may do say about 7,000-8,000 shillings or 10,000 shillings per meter, depending on the difficulty of the site.
Let's just talk about Machakos here.
Yeah, so
you've
Machakos
gone
will
to the
charge
site.
about 7,000 shillings per meter from there.
7,000 per meter. What's
Yes.
the average depth you go to?
So call it 150.
150
meters. Oh, wait until I tell you Nairobi is approaching 400. Yeah,
400 what?
meters.
Meters?
Yes,
To get water?
yes.
What are you talking about?
I'm telling you. I told you I'm a practitioner.
How deep is the
Yeah.
water table
It is.
in Nairobi?
It is.
Wait, so 7,000 per meter.
Yeah.
Let's back it up a bit. 7,000 per meter in Machakos.
Yeah.
So you have to go 150 meters.
Yes.
So that's how much?
1,050,000. A
That's
million
times
50.
150,
Yes.
which gives 1,050,000.
Yes.
So this is now
plus all the other costs.
Plus
No,
336,000.
Yeah, okay, that's for
Yeah.
around 200,000
Yeah.
more. You add to that figure.
So once you dig 150 meters, you ni kuchimba tu.
You kuchimba tu.
You have not set up anything.
No.
No, we have not put a pump. We have not powered it.
And you've not, because it's not just the earth.
Yes.
There's something that
Yeah.
you put.
Yes, and then we have not
Around
stored.
the casing.
We have not
The
done
casing,
yes,
yeah.
yes. No, that's inclusive of casing. But you haven't.
The
you
plumbing.
haven't- that first of all. Wait, we go back to WRA at that point. We pay another 25,000
For what?
for something called a permit, abstraction permit.
Is that not involved in this other thing?
No,
that
that
you've had to
20
pay
was
before?
authorization to drill. Now you have to pay to use the resource,
Another 20,000.
25.
25.
And then you have to pay 2
One
shillings
time,
and
one-
50 cents for every 1,000 litre of water.
Okay, you need to stop.
So basically, how much does it cost a regular Kenyan to drill borehole?
So from start to end, you're staring at, on the minimum, call it 2 million shillings. That is if the borehole is short, easy to drill,
And the county has favorable rates.
and the county is favorable. Now, we have more problems.
I know we don't see Cornelius. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow us to even go into these problems because we are at the point whereby that all of this is being charged and somebody then is trying to operate within business, number
Yes.
one, and that we're saying that it is not the person's fault that there's no water,
Yeah.
and they're trying to find some water, whether it's a business or whether it's a community, household, whatever the case may be. But that it just does seem as though you're being punished for being in an already difficult situation and trying to make the most of it.
Yeah.
Very quickly, because our time has come to an end.
Yeah.
Do you think that this can all this is clear that it is difficult to do, it's frustrating?
Yeah.
Is there a way through if we start to relax a little bit to decrease the tension and a lot of these regulations and laws and permits in order for business to be done? Is it
Yes,
possible?
it is. It is. And this is what we've been discussing with the WRA. Like I said, as the Rigoners, we were there just last week to have this discussion and say, how do we ease? And by the way, this CEO that I was talking to,
Yeah.
very fine gentleman.
Yeah.
Very fine gentleman. We've had, I've even personally had, meetings of my own when I'm running into problems. Now, the issue is, first of all, we need, in my own personal opinion, these counties need to follow the law. First of all, they have no business charging for water. And second, and most important, they ought to follow the law, the fourth schedule. It does not give them power to charge for this resource. Now, second, if you are in Turkana, why would you punish somebody who's actually trying to do your job?
To do your job for you.
If you were doing it in the first place, I wouldn't exist.
There you go. Cornelius Chepsoi has joined us this morning, opening our eyes to the realities that most people are going through every single day in terms of trying to get business done and in terms of also just trying to survive. We have to open the lid on a lot of these things and we have to have these conversations. We want to thank you for joining us this morning. It's another one of those ones where we leave ourselves hanging because the question is what really ought to happen next. But it's good that we have the conversations. It's important for us to do. We want to thank you for being in the hot seat this morning.
Thank you.
The conversations definitely, folks, must continue.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.